Jen, welcome back to Mea Culpa podcast. Look, hour goes by, as you know, way too quick, especially when you and I chat. So I'm going to jump straight into it. Jen, here's what everybody's afraid to say out loud. Not necessarily me, right? But many. Epstein files haven't been released because they don't just name names, they name power. Who do you believe is pulling the strings to keep them buried? And what does it tell you about how justice works for the rich and the well-connected?
So, Michael, you know this is my favorite topic because I found, obviously, a link between the lack of enforcement of white-collar criminal statutes against the most powerful, as well as a different kind of implicit immunity for non-economic crimes. We've all seen how the defense of quote unquote influenza has helped young men who have wealthy parents and also helped the really powerful people in this world skate by. And we can think of, I can name some names, Prince Andrew.
This goes to Mea Culpa. We name names here. We're not shy.
I will name names with the acknowledgement that, you know, when I name names, I'm doing it with the full knowledge and receipts, right? So we've got Prince Andrew, who was credibly accused of, sexually assaulting a child, right? This is the story of Virginia Giuffre, who is no longer with us. She is featured when she is 16 or 17 years old in photographs with Prince Andrew. That case settled, and we don't know the full amount of that settlement, but we know whatever he did was so distasteful that the Queen took away, I believe, his title at some point and kind of exiled him to some degree from the family. So we're talking about this going to the highest corridors and courts of power. Now, we name names. We also know that your former boss, before you joined him, had a very close relationship with Jeff Epstein, that they were purportedly the closest of friends, especially between the time of his divorce from Ivana in, I think, 1992 through around 2004 or 5. And then they had that falling out over a real estate deal. During that time period, Donald Trump is partying with, flying on a plane with, checking out young women and sometimes girls, allegedly with Epstein. I think Donald himself, when it comes to kids, is less the issue. I think that there are other very powerful people who have Donald's ear, whether he is blackmailing them or he just likes to be tight with powerful men and he's trying to keep this under wraps on their behalf, is how I see it. I also, on my show this morning, as you know, I also have a show on YouTube every morning, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., Monday through Friday, just called Jen Taub Live. Sorry for that plug.
That's a great plug.
I did something today called Is Epstein, my title today is Epstein haunting Donald Trump? And I loved my thumbnail today because I actually think Donald is being haunted by the ghost of Jeff Epstein, and that he's now learning not to speak his name. And that's why he is trying to, every time he thinks of Epstein and how angry he is that Epstein won't die, he starts talking about Obama or Biden or Hillary. But behind all of that, he is, I think, enraged that he can't make this story die. He is haunted by Epstein. I can't figure it out. I have no evidence that Epstein was killed. It seems likely to me that he committed suicide, but he just wasn't watched well. But there's really weird, if you've looked at the interview, if you go back and look at that interview with Jonathan Swan, where he's asked by Swan, why did you wish Maxwell good luck? Wish her well. And his immediate answer was, well, her boyfriend or friend either died or was killed in prison. That's his response. So his implication is, now that Ghislaine's in prison, will she die? That's a very weird response. And part of me thinks maybe someone around him made sure that Epstein died. Donald doesn't give orders. So I'm not saying, I believe Epstein committed suicide, but was encouraged to do so. I'm not so dark that I think he was killed, but they certainly did not keep an eye on that man when he was suicidal. And I do think Donald is somehow weirdly haunted by this ghost.
Interesting. So look, the way I see it, the longer that these files stay sealed, the more they serve as like a protective shield. Not a path to justice, a protective shield, again, for the rich and the well-connected.
Sure.
What legal pretexts are actually being used right now to keep these documents under wraps? And are they legit, or is it just a matter of convenience?
So that's a good question, because as you probably know, in the absence of something like a FOIA request, there's no obligation that our government release files from a closed criminal investigation, right? It requires some kind of request. And I believe that there have been FOIA requests from things like the Miami Herald, right? Let's look at the other things. We just saw that the House Oversight Committee has voted to subpoena Ghislaine Maxwell to testify. But of course, right when that happened, Todd Blanche, one of Donald Trump's attorneys, has been in communication with Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney to have a quiet, private, one-on-one sit-down. Okay, so there is no legal obligation absent responding to a FOIA request or responding to a subpoena. But anything like that is going to be probably washed away, because I wouldn't be surprised if there is a pardon that issues for Ghislaine Maxwell and she is released from prison, and then she doesn't speak. She refuses to respond. And I think she can take the fifth, because arguably there is activity for which she, well, I don't know. I mean, even if she's fully pardoned.
Right. No, you're right. She has an appeal that's out there based upon the 20-year sentence, and that any testimony that she gives at these hearings obviously can be used against her, by the court in making its determination as to whether to reduce the sentence and so on. So
you make a good point.
You
make a better point than me. Michael, you are so much smarter than me on this point. And I'm not just blowing smoke here. They won't want to actually
blow in the smoke. I appreciate it.
I know, but I'm serious. They won't want to issue the pardon right away. They won't want that case to be ongoing. Now, they could, of course, drop the case, right? Because she's asking she's asking for this appeal of her sentence. But if they keep that going, she has this excuse, one, not to testify before Congress, right?
Yeah.
So this could drag out with the tacit understanding that no one's going to kill her in prison. That she'll get her pardon if she shuts the F up.
Yeah.
So, the bigger question is, we've seen the names, right? Some of the names that are suspect are people like Leon Black, right? The financier, and Lex Wexner, the clothing, Victoria's Secret
guy. Lex Wexner, to me, is hands down one of the most curious aspects of this file, far greater than Trump. And the worst part that I hate this is anytime I say anything that somebody turns and says, well, now you're defending Trump. You're taking the knee. What are they threatening your family? Why are you kissing the ring? I understand this case. I understand Donald Trump. Les Wexner, to me, is the most curious individual in this case. You're probably squinting right now and saying,
I'm excited to hear your revelation.
I'm saying, why would you say that, Michael? Enlighten me. Well, Jen, that's what I plan on doing here. Right?
Enlighten me. That word wasn't there, but thank you.
So, the townhouse that Jeffrey Epstein was residing in here in New York City has a value to it today of over $80 million. When he moved into it, it was somewhere in the ballpark of 60 million plus. It's a massive townhouse on the Upper East Side between Madison Avenue and Fifth Avenue in the most expensive blocks that exist. That house was given to him by Lex Wexner for $1. For $1. Exactly. And I'm like wondering how, why. I'm a nice guy. Nobody ever gave me shit. Not for $1, not for $100.
I sent you golf balls from my old university.
Oh yeah, by the way, nothing for nothing. I lost them in the first hole when I was playing like a couple of years back. I lost all three.
That's fine. When you speak next year to my new school, I will send you something. But anyhow, go ahead. Oh, you're right. $1?
Yeah,
$1.
It's like for $1, and we're talking about a $60 million townhouse in the most prestigious area, massive townhouse. A lot of reports say, "Oh, it's the largest townhouse in New York City." No, it's not. No, it's not. But
so what's interesting is because he's dead.
Nice.
Although he didn't have children or a spouse, I wonder if his estate gets a stepped up basis on that and don't have to pay capital gains on the I don't know. Well, I don't care. Anyway, the point is Lex Wexner.
All that money. By the way, one last point that I want you then to respond to. When Jeffrey Epstein died, his estate was valued at over $600 million. That's a shit ton of money. All right. Where nobody
for a math teacher.
Right. For a guy who didn't even have a teaching degree, who, by the way, whose boss, the guy who hired him, happens to be the father of Bill Barr, right? I mean, please understand that none of this makes any sense at all. How does somebody accumulate that sort of wealth and yet nobody actually knows what he even did for a living?
Let's just look at, I want to pull this thread, but I first want to, the Bill Barr's father thread in 1 second, but I want to talk about Lex Wexner. For people like us, Gen X, we know Limited, right? Limited Brands was it the Temu or what do they call
like the Alibaba, the Temu.
No, but it was like, what do they call it? The Abercrombie and Fitch or the Forever 21 of our era. Like Limited was a sexier Gap. Like the Gap when we were kids in the 70s had like husky corduroys and shit like that, and Levi's. And then you come with a Limited and they had like the off-shoulder sweaters and it was like a cooler Gap. And then he gets into Victoria's Secret. And I wonder whether, there's some allegations about these Victoria's Secret models. I know Donald Trump dated one. I'm not sure what the relationship is with Lex Wexner. I guess his people claim, I get him confused with Leon Black, but everyone's claiming that Jeff Epstein saved people like billions of dollars in taxes. But that begs the question or invites the question of why did they even know about him in the first place? You look at the files that Ron Wyden's committee and Following the Money is looking at, and he's talking about over $1 billion in suspicious activity reports filed in 2019 for activity going way back by banks, including Deutsche Bank and JP Morgan Chase. And these are banks that have started to settle with the victims. But these suspicious activity reports are looking at, we're talking about over $1 billion in transactions. I think I was reading that some of these transactions would be like 4,000 different transactions in and out of bank accounts, some paid to young women, young women, not children in like Eastern Europe. But where is the money coming in from? Right. So there's a lot going on there. Let me go back to, though, because I really think it's interesting that Jeff Epstein, before he worked at a bank and was fired because of fraud, I think he hadn't even been graduated college. He was good at math. And so he taught, I guess, math and physics at a private school. Was it Dalton?
The Dalton
School. And the headmaster was Bill Barr's father. What I find interesting is all the major attorneys that Donald Trump hired to run the Justice Department, the Attorney General. You look at Bill Barr, he's got a connection to Epstein. He also selected in his second term Matt Gaetz with a credible history of child sex abuse, cases that were dropped, and very vulgar behavior, right? Then you have, who else does he choose? Pam Bondi. What's her connection? Well, Pam Bondi, we know, was the head prosecutor, the U.S. attorney, U.S. attorney for the state of Florida, who looked the other way with a fake university and was kind of on the beat and did nothing when Donald Trump and Jeff Epstein, or specifically Jeff Epstein, was involved in all of this. So why is it that he's done that? I mean, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but it's hard to not just see these things add up.
Yeah, I mean, look, the world is quite large, and yet somehow there's a connected dot, to each and every one of these individuals. But you know what pisses me off the most? What pisses me off is that we've got victims that is still waiting for answers. All right. Mm-hmm. We have a public that's demanding accountability. And by the way, that public is not the Democratic Party. That public includes the MAGA faithful, the far-right MAGA base that's more vocal about this than even the Democrats. And we also have, on top of all of this, a sealed vault of depositions and flight logs and information in a file that's literally just gathering dust. So the question I want to ask you, what would it take, legally and politically, to blow that vault wide open?
Wow.
Would it just take Donald Trump saying, release it?
And you say vault, and I don't know if you mean that figuratively.
I mean it metaphorically.
Or literally. Yeah, metaphorically. And let's just talk about what's in the vault. I mean, this is public records. When Jeff Epstein was arrested and then, handcuffed and put in prison, he never left. And there were raids, as you mentioned, of this fabulous $80 million home that he was gifted. And in this home, this is in the reporting. And by the way, the Department of Justice's filing, as you know, there were CD-ROMs. And these CD-ROMs were labeled. You know where I'm going with this. And they were labeled with a kind of format that would say, a name of a last name, maybe of a person, or the full name. So it'd be John Doe, but a real name. Let's say Lex Wexner. I don't know if he's there, or just John Doe. And I'm sorry, it's the other way around. It would say young Abby or young Maria, right? And it would go young Maria and John Doe. And there are countless of these. And undoubtedly, the names on there are not, no one suggested that these were pseudonyms. I don't want to see those CD-ROMs. And I feel bad for the people who have to look at those. But anyone who has prosecuted child sexual abuse, it is traumatic, and they have to look at those. And you don't have to watch the whole thing to see, is that person? And this is before there were deep fakes, right? This is stuff that he recorded back in the day. So that is there in the so-called vault. No one's really talking about that. I care about the victims, people like Maria Farmer, who's now suing the Department of Justice because they did not protect her, right? I want to pivot to one thing I've been thinking about ever since I watched your interview the other night
With
with, who was it
Michael
with?
Wolf?
Iman? No, with Iman. I
With
watched the one. Yeah,
Eamon, yeah.
Amen. And I think, some of this, I was beginning to think why it was that by the time you joined, I mean, you came in his orbit in 2005. You said in 2007 you had the real role there. By the
Correct.
time you came into Trump's orbit, he didn't mention Epstein. He
Nope.
wasn't connected with him.
Nope.
And so I'm thinking, okay, so what I have, he did have that falling out over real estate. And ironically, I think it was another one of these homes that had been owned by Lex Wexner in
No.
Florida.
I don't think so. The house that I think the deal was over was the one that I was involved with that sold for $95 million to the Russian oligarch Dmitry Rybolovlev in Palm Beach on the water that Trump
But
bought
before
out of
that,
bankruptcy.
before it became owned by the Russian oligarch, I was reading, and I don't want to look it up right now, and we can, you can correct me if
I
I'm
don't
wrong.
know. Yeah, all I
I
know
was
is
reading somewhere that Wexner had owned it and that he had gotten rid of it. Hold on. Wexner, Palm Beach house oligarch. I was reading, ironically, that it was, yes, this home had been owned by Wexner, and then he sold it
I did not
off.
know
And I
that.
think, look it up. And I'm sorry, but
I'll do that. Yeah.
yeah, and then the oligarch got it, and Donald Trump overpays for it, and
No,
now later it's
the other way. No, the other way around.
oh,
So, in other words,
underpaid.
Trump bought it for $40 million in a bankruptcy auction. And I understand this only because Michael Wolf, the journalist, had told me about this. I didn't know how Donald even came to know about this property. It appears that it was Jeffrey Epstein that asked Donald to come with him to look at the property as a real estate expert and to give him some advice and guidance. Trump then came in, swooped in, and bought it out of bankruptcy. And that was supposedly the big fight between the two. Now, 2 years later, or 2.5, 3 years later, Trump ended up selling it, putting it on the market through Sotheby's. The house was sold to Dmitry Rybolovlev. That was an arm's length transaction. It was done again through Sotheby's. Trump had nothing to do with it other than listing it as the owner, slapped on a bunch of coats of paint and sold it for $95 million, made a $55 million profit, on that house, which I'm sure bothered Jeffrey Epstein even more. But the fact, now I get why Epstein wanted that house so much, because it would line up with the fact that he was buying another, say, Les Wexner, property.
Yes,
or
and I just
living in
found the
another.
piece.
Yeah.
So the Palm Beach Daily News, just, because this stuff is kind of coming together. This is an article from July 19th, so just this past week. It said that the estate was formerly owned by retail magnate Leslie Wexner, who at the time of Epstein's 2019 arrest, which was later, was the only publicly identified client of Epstein's financial advisory firm. So there's an interesting history there. You're right. So what I wanted to say is, what I noticed, there are some people who argue that the reason why, the cops ignore, from 96 until 2005, what Epstein is doing. There are people who argue that maybe Donald Trump, out of spite, said something about Epstein to the police. I don't know if that's true, but it coincides with around the time they were fighting. And if I have it right, he was pissed because if Epstein was bidding, that just drove the price up for him. Or just a fight over land.
I think it was the other way around, that Trump ended up taking the property out of bankruptcy. Wexner,
so why was he mad?
Because Jeffrey Epstein brought him to the property because Jeffrey wanted to buy it for himself. That was supposed to be his house in Palm Beach, just another property, and Trump ended up stealing it because he liked the property and thought it was a good deal. I shouldn't say stole it in the physical sense. I'm talking about stole it away from him.
So they were pissed off, and then then Epstein gets investigated, he gets charged, he goes to sort of gets that special settlement on the federal case, but he kind of nominally goes to prison in 2008, right? So I think it's really interesting that this is around the time. I wonder to myself, well, if Donald Trump is like this, cheater and predator, isn't this around, and he stops hanging with Epstein. So this is around the time, right around the time when Melania is pregnant, and Donald, what is he doing? He's moved on to Playboy models, right? This is the Stormy Daniels period. This is whoever the other woman was.
Karen McDougal.
Right. So he's in a different kind of phase at this point in terms of his behavior. So I don't know. I thought I was trying to kind of put the pieces together there. And as you know, you're familiar with his catch and kill enterprise. I think he probably thought that might be a better way to have these dalliances with people who were of age, but very young still relative to him in their 20s, and not have the publicity come out.
Okay, so I'm glad you bring this up because I've heard from several different people, Mike Wolf included, who's probably the most knowledgeable as it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, because
he interviewed him
for several years, by the way, for many hours. Yeah. I just want to make something clear. So let's assume for a moment that Trump was a participant in the Epstein saga, right? And now imagine that they're having a fight. I don't know what the fight is about. Trump ended up with the property. There's nothing left to fight about, right? Oh, you want to be mad at me? You want to call me a dick because I stole this valuable piece of Palm Beach property away from you that I paid $40 million for? Okay, be mad at me, and so on. But the thought that Trump would drop a dime on Epstein to law enforcement to sort of fuck him up as a payback, so to speak, that to me doesn't seem rational, because if he was a participant, to me, what that kind of explains is that maybe he wasn't a participant. He may have knowledge of what was potentially going on there, which has its own implications, but was not a participant in it. Because that in essence is, as the old expression goes, cutting off your nose to spite your face. Right?
For sure.
Why would you go to law enforcement when you are implicated in the same shit? And this is not something that you can get away from, right? Once the DOJ, the law enforcement start investigating a child pedophilia, sex trafficking ring, I don't care who you are. If they're strong enough and they're brave enough to go after the likes of the people that they did, including Prince Andrew and others, rest assured, Trump was not the Donald Trump today back then. And so that's why I routinely say, I just don't see Trump as a participant. What I see him as maybe somebody who knew that Epstein was into these young kids. And how do we know that? Look, let me just say, I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't go to Yale. I didn't go to Princeton. I didn't go Ivy League. But here's something that I understand. I understand the street. And I understand that you would be out of your mind to go ahead and to drop a dime on somebody that will ultimately implicate you. And how? Because there are photographs. Every single day we see a multitude of photographs. I don't think there are any new ones, at least not that we're aware of, but photographs that have Trump and Epstein with young kids. Now, you don't have to be a Ivy League graduate to know what a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid looks like. All right? The only 13, 14, 15-year-old kids that I'm in pictures with are either at my children's bar and bat mitzvah, as we're standing in a line, or, right, my children, right, or my nieces and nephews. Short of that, or friends' kids, right? If we're at a pool party or something like that. But
what about The problem is the 17-year-olds, right? The problem is this idea that regardless of the line, which is 18, that 17-year-old girls can look developed, etc. And they don't necessarily see it the same way. But let me go back to your point. It
By the
is
way,
an enigma.
that's a great point.
Right, because there's an argument there. And I'm not trying to justify, I'm just trying to say, gone through puberty, look different, even though mentally not capable, predatory. This is the justification people like Dershowitz give. But you are 100% right. And what I don't understand, what totally plagues me, is why he would build this up, like as we're going to go after them. Michael, something changed with Donald that suddenly they were going to release these files. What happened between March and June, or it was July, between March and July, when these files were scoured and Bondi decided suddenly, because it wasn't right away, to like flag the Donald stuff, and he saw something in there, either about himself or other wealthy people are telling him, F you, don't do this, or I'm going to do X to you. Like, what is it that is making, don't know.
Right. So that's the whole problem. And it's why I keep saying to people that it's the silence, it's the lack of the access to the information that is spewing all of these conspiracy theories. I had a whole fight, the other day I was doing on my Substack with Jim Acosta. We do like a Michael Monday show, and people were getting mad at me because I said, we don't know anything, right? I'll tell you what I do know. I know that Trump didn't draw that picture, that birthday card picture.
Your point was good, that those annual things might have been drawn by Rona Graff or whomever.
It wouldn't be Rona. Right? She wasn't an artist either, but his executive assistants were all not just good artists, they were phenomenal. All right. And most of the signatures weren't even by Donald, like the ones on the ties or the golf balls and so on that they were selling downstairs. Donald's not going to sit with 10,000 golf balls and write his name on it.
But the charity auction picture, he could have scribbled after they drew it, right?
Yeah, he may have just
it's one a year.
By the way, he may have just colored it in, but he certainly didn't draw it. That I can assure you. And by the way, there's like, Donald was a doodler. Donald is not a doodler. All right, and they, well, you're protecting him. No, I'm stating a fact. The fact is, in the decade and a half that I was by this guy's side for over 10,000 hours, Donald Trump never doodled. He never even just drew lines. Sometimes you're sitting there, you're on the phone with somebody, you just start scribbling lines and so on. Not him. In fact, he doesn't even...
I scribble words, but not. Yes.
Words, pictures. Like I would doodle squares and boxes and little houses and stick figures, whatever.
But let me say why people are arguing. I think people have to take you seriously and literally. I mean, you were right about the Prague thing.
I've been right about everything so far.
Well, the building from this, though, is that it's possible that he said, I got to write a card for Epstein, do something like this. And he could have dictated the conversation. Now, I know you say he never says enigma, but he called Ben Carson an enigma the other year.
Yeah, it's not in his vocabulary. Maybe somebody said it a few minutes before him, even back then.
Or Epstein used that word. Yeah, that might have been their euphemism.
You ever walk out of a doctor's office and you feel like you just got conned? Like they barely looked at you, but they told you that you're fine. Maybe threw in that, drink some more water, and that's it. No real info, no plan, just a shrug and a bill. Hey, don't forget your copay. I mean, I've been there more times than I care to admit. And you know what? I'm done with it. And that's why I signed up for Superpower. And let me tell you, this thing is the real freaking deal. They send a licensed professional to your house, or you hit a nearby lab and they run over 100 biomarkers, 100. And that's not a typo. Your heart, your liver, your thyroid, hormones, metabolism, vitamin levels, environmental toxins. I mean, it's like popping the hood of your body and seeing what's really going on. But here's the kicker. Superpower doesn't just hand you a bunch of confusing charts and send you packing. No. They give you an actionable plan, custom supplements, nutrition that actually works for your biology, some lifestyle changes, the whole thing. And yeah, they tell you your true biological age so that you can track how you're actually aging. Turns out mine's holding up, well, somewhat okay, even after all the crap that I've been through. I mean, you're not guessing anymore. You're not relying on a 10-minute appointment from someone who forgot your name before you left the room. This isn't about taking control. It's about knowing your blueprint and actually doing something with it. So here's what I want you to do. Go right now to superpower.com and use code Cohen. That's Cohen, Cohen, and you're going to get $50 off your annual membership. And stop reacting. Start optimizing. Your biology decoded, your blueprint activated with superpower. So here's what I truly believe, that Ghislaine probably wrote out all of these different statements and sent it to different individuals, like 50 different individuals, in order to do a birthday book for Jeffrey, right? And just take what we wrote and just try to put something in context, a doodle that matches into this. So when you're talking about the secret this, you do a naked what. But I don't think Trump even came up with the idea. I think it was probably the girls who did it, and then he just signed his name, to make it sexual and to make it funny, because he wants to be funny. Right? I mean, you see him when he's standing up. He wants to be charming. He wants to be an entertainer. He wants to impress. And you're not going to be impressed by his doodle art.
So let's assume for a second, your explanation is very plausible. What follows from that? If Ghislaine thought that would be a kind of conversation about a secret that they had, it's still creepy. We can just say that.
By the way, it's creepy. It's stupid. It's immature and juvenile. Here's the funny thing, as I said on TV yesterday, it's not criminal. To send a stupid card is not criminal, especially not one of a drawing. All right? I don't care what it says. Again, the big problem that we have is the fact that there's nothing but conspiracy theories coming out of the fact that nobody is releasing the information that for 7 years now, all we've been hearing, Trump's going to release the Epstein file. He's going to release the Martin Luther King file. He's going to release the JFK file. He released part of the JFK file. He released the part of the
MLK.
The MLK file. Who knows what's going to happen with this one? But
why? Go back to your question to me at the beginning. Why is there a cover up?
Right.
And who is he covering up for? Because as you saw, Mike Johnson is shutting down the House until September. Because he doesn't want
to.
He doesn't want the Republicans to vote on this.
So my Substack, by the way, Jen, my Substack of this morning, I entitled it, "You Can't Redact a Reckoning." And it's all about Mike Johnson trying to run out the clock and bury the Epstein file. But here's the problem. Justice demands full exposure. No edits, no exceptions, every name, every page. And that's what I write about, because it's not just the Democrats. See, that's what they're trying to say. All of a sudden, the Democrats are interested in this file. Why? Is it the 6-month time and stuff? It's not the Democrats that want it, for God's sakes. Right. It is the MAGA right that feel used and feel to be made stupid that they bought into this lie.
And he calls them stupid and he calls them weaklings. I need to go back to this. You know him better than anyone. Well, not anyone. I mean, he knows himself, etc. But you're up there. The only people I've ever seen Donald Trump cover for are Putin and himself. Vladimir Putin is not in the Epstein files.
That I doubt. Can assure you.
So why? It doesn't make any sense why he is doing this.
Right.
What is your theory, Michael? Because I heard what is your theory?
I don't have one. I don't have a theory because you're not wrong. Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump. And so based upon that statement, which everybody knows, the conspiracy theorists are right at it. And the problem with conspiracy theorists is that they're never satisfied. How do I know this? I lived it. And when you brought up, like, for example, FOIA, fuck FOIA. FOIA is a worthless garbage group of people that do absolutely nothing. I have FOIA requests in for over 5 years. Expedited decision and processing was granted to me by the judge. I have not received a single piece of paper in regard to the Russia hoax, not a single, and I have Mark Zaid on the case. It's not like I have some nobody. I have the premier lawyer in the country with Brian Elias, both of them, the premier lawyers in the country, Mark Elias, right, with on this matter. And we have not received a single document. In fact, every time we even get close, when we were in court, they turned around. This is government, DOJ, saying, well, we need now to send it to 17 additional government agencies to review and to redact before we send it to you. So then we said, which of the 17 that you need to? Well, we can't tell you. Why can't you tell us? It could be national security. It could give methods and process away. And the fucking judge bought into it. The judge said, okay, well, just you need to do it on an expedited basis. That was 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years ago. So when Donald Trump goes out there, because let me tell you about Donald's brilliance, and it is, he takes something that has a moniker of truth to it, and he explodes it. It's kind of like the metaphor of one piece of sand and that becomes the entire beach. That's what he does. So when he's talking about, for example, the Steele dossier, first of all, I don't know how much was paid on it. He's throwing out some wild numbers. He turned around, he brings in Comey, he brings in Obama, he brings in this one. By the way, how do we know that that's not true? Those are the documents I'm seeking. Those are the documents I was seeking when I was bringing my First Amendment lawsuit under Bivens against the United States government, Bill Barr, and others. The DOJ, I couldn't get a goddamn thing. So, by the way, I hope to God he goes after Comey and Obama with this, because the Russia hoax is actually partially correct. He's not wrong. The Steele dossier was bullshit. And what it ended up doing is it ended up creating this massive series of committee hearings, congressional committee hearings, and it ended up ultimately, when they couldn't find shit against me on that based upon my hearings, they turned around and they found a SARS report, as you were talking about, suspicious activity on $130,000 that went from my account, it was my money, to an attorney in Beverly Hills, California. It wasn't like I was sending it to Iran or to Moscow or to Syria, right?
Let me read. Merrick fucking Garland should have prosecuted Donald Trump, even though Bill Barr dropped the case, because once again, why is it that you went to prison and not the guy you were paying off a porn star for? You didn't get even a kiss out of Stormy Daniels.
No.
Now, I just came up with something.
I never met Stormy until last year, New Year's, when we were on a panel together in Washington, D.C. It was the first time I ever met her.
Was she nice?
Oh, she's incredibly nice. I've had her on this podcast several times, but I've never met her in person. I never spoke to her before that.
Okay, Michael, bear with me. What do you think of this idea? Let's assume that, because this makes sense, Donald Trump did not believe he was implicated in any important way in the Epstein files other than knew the guy, and wrote a body or signed a body letter, right? Hung out with the guy, said gross things, but nothing criminal that he thought. But what happened that turned his head, is it possible that someone who feels threatened by what's in there has other dirt on Donald.
So let me say this to you.
I don't know what the other dirt is. It doesn't have to be sexual.
Right.
It
So
could be anything.
So let me say this to you.
Okay.
This is exactly the problem. This is exactly what I wrote about in
The
my
hypothesizing
note.
is the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not somebody who lives by innuendo, by speculation, by conspiracy theories. There's no reason for any of us to be living with those three things, because there is a file that was assembled by law enforcement, people who work for the American people. If Donald Trump and others are claiming that this is national security, it's a national security matter, or that this is that the justification for the releasing of this information is because of public interest and national need for this information, well, then what the hell is holding everybody up? This is the problem. I don't want to engage in conspiracy theory talk, hypothetical innuendos. Not when the documents are sitting there gathering dust. When Pam Bondi and the merry band of morons were holding up the binders showing we have the client list, we have the documents, we have the information. Great. Now fucking release it. Now show it to us unredacted.
Theory 2. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is a boring legal theory. You'll like it.
Okay.
They're all ready to release this stuff. And some lawyer in the Department of Justice tells Bondi or Bill Barr or Acosta, say, not your Acosta, the other guy, say to them, I know you want to release this stuff. Remember that really shady non-prosecution agreement that was entered into in Florida with the co-conspirators of Jeff Epstein? And those names may have included Lex Wexner. Well, you're not allowed to release any part of these files that touched on the activity that transpired before 2004. And so maybe that is the complexity of this. It could just be something simple.
So I don't think so, because if that was the case, they would come out and say, we have a legal issue that's being challenged on the release. And once we get past it, then we intend to release the entire file unredacted as promised. They've never brought that up. They never said that there are legal issues that they have to contend with. What they have said is that, it's not in the practice for the DOJ to release 302s, grand jury witness statements and stuff like that, once a case is sort of sealed, that it has to go through the legal process.
I'm not giving up that simply. Okay, wait. Give me another try at this. What if, because I don't think we know who is a subject of that NPA. Obviously, we don't know who was protected. I don't think.
Right, from my listeners, that's a non-prosecution agreement.
Yeah, sorry, non-prosecution agreement. We don't know who the men or women were on that. We know it wasn't Ghislaine, because that's why she got prosecuted. What if, in an abundance of caution, because he's always been friends with Dersh, who did this, what if Donald said, what the hell, throw my name in? What if he doesn't want it released, that out of an abundance of caution, he was included in the non-prosecution agreement?
Listen, again, every theory that you are throwing out there has a basis of fact to it. What if hypothetically the documents demonstrate that it was Trump who was the informant, right? I mean, what if that's the case? That then shows that he had knowledge of the underage, sex trafficking as well.
Which makes him look good to MAGA, you would think.
It doesn't make him look good. Even to MAGA, pedophilia is bad, right? I mean, even to them. So maybe that is an issue that he doesn't want to contend with. I don't know. You don't know. I'll tell you who does know. law enforcement that put together that very extensive file called the Jeffrey Epstein file.
So
And that's
Maureen
why,
Comey knows. Maureen Comey knows.
well, then Maureen Comey should turn around and come forward, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, what's she doing? She's been fired.
Yeah, I don't know. I think she is. I don't know. She could, I don't know, make some. I don't know. There'd be some argument for her to make. It's. I
It
don't know. I
depends,
don't know
though. I
what
mean,
the
it's really hard. You know, you're a lawyer. And it's one thing to protect. You're not allowed to protect someone who tells you, I'm gonna rob a bank. Like, right? You can't.
But she also doesn't have the documents, so it would be hearsay up until the point that they release the files anyway.
Well, she does, because wasn't she the prosecutor of Ghislaine
Yes,
Maxwell?
but she has
Not
knowledge,
everything.
but she doesn't have the documents. The documents are,
Right.
yeah, and I don't know. She probably doesn't want to lose her law license either, even though
Right.
it's in furtherance of a crime or a cover up. I'm not sure. Hey, let me ask you this about Ghislaine, right? Because the DOJ now has this quiet outreach to her, and I don't think that that's coming out of nowhere. What do you think of the legal or the political scenarios that would push the DOJ back to the table with a convicted co-conspirator who has so far, after all this time, and I want my listeners to think about it, she's kept her mouth shut now for years, and she's got a 20-year sentence. Imagine if you know something so significant. How do you keep your mouth shut when that info can actually be the info that gets you out of prison? Because trust me, I was there for 13 months. It was supposed to be 36. Because of COVID, I got out early. Thank you, Donald and Bill Barr, for that one, the CARES Act. But she kept her mouth shut for all this time. Something is so odd here. Again, it's why the files need to be released. But what's your thoughts?
Listen, I wouldn't want to be killed in prison. There's a non-zero chance that Epstein was killed, even though I believe he committed suicide. So if I were Ghislaine Maxwell, I would keep my mouth shut for that reason. The same reason why you don't rat out the mob.
Many people did. They put you into witness protection in the interim. This is big enough. However, this is Trump's DOJ right now. But all of this could have been done under the Biden administration. Hey, can I just switch topics for one quick second? Because I really want to jump into this whole thing with the Wall Street Journal and, the handwritten birthday card and so on. Because I called this one. In fact, I did it even 24 hours before this came out. It appears now that Trump has stripped the Wall Street Journal of its press privilege in the White House.
Can't travel with him now. Yep.
The whole 9 yards. It's why I turned around in my Substack of 3 days ago. I turned around and said that the Wall Street Journal, Rupert Murdoch, will settle with Trump because it's financially in their best interest. Just like it was for ABC, just like it was for CBS, just like it was for so many of those law firms. What's your take on this?
So I'm thinking about this, and, I don't know how the ownership structure works. I know Dow Jones owns the Wall Street Journal, which is, of course, part of the whole Rupert Murdoch, Fox News empire. And in contemplating whether they would make this a donation to make this go away,
that's my Substack.
I would not be surprised, because although I think making the donation is different than telling the reporters, don't report on this, right?
By the way, the donation, by the way, Jen, the donation is tax deductible. So, it's not like it's going to interfere with their bottom line anyway.
I mean, Rupert, the issue to me isn't so much whether Rupert, because he's one of the defendants, settles the case on behalf of everybody and makes that donation. The bigger question is whether they will change their editorial practices at the Wall Street Journal, which has a famously independent edit side, even though the editorial board is very conservative. I do think if he decides, I think one of the things in this mix is they don't want him to fire the chairman of the Fed, right? Yep. And Jerome Powell. So, to me, there's a lot of pieces going on. I wouldn't be surprised if Murdoch settled. I also wouldn't be entirely surprised if he didn't. And the case continued.
See, I would, because I know what
because they want access, right?
Yeah, I know what I would be doing right now if I was in that inner circle. I would make the Wall Street Journal's life absolutely hell. Not only are you not going to get any information, you keep pushing and pushing this case. I want discovery. I want all the communications for the past 3 years between anybody in the entire Wall Street Journal community that mentions the name Trump, Donald Trump, POTUS, anything like that. I would want all those communications so that
he would have to also disclose part of the Epstein files where he is claimed. I mean, there's more to that. I mean, I hear what you're saying. The deal is, in the cases, he's a plaintiff now, in some cases still. Mm-hmm. And he is not complying with discovery. So this thing could just drag out. The real issue you're talking about is losing access. My question is, let's say for a second,
advertisers.
Okay. Let's say for a second you're right, because you're not usually, and you'll say if ever, wrong. The bigger question for me is, what's the timing? Do they drop their other stories first and then settle? Because they've got a ton on the back burner.
Yes, they're going. That's hey, we were going to do this, this, and this to show you our loyalty. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a $10-15 million donation to your future presidential library.
Oh, I don't mean drop. I mean drop as in how the kids say it.
No.
Publish.
No.
I mean publish.
No way.
Oh, I think so.
Oh, no way. No way. I am 100% certain.
I think they'll quit.
They are profit motivated. They don't care about the reporting. When they start losing their advertisers, when they start losing their subscription base and so on, now they're turning and saying, you know what? It's exactly why these law firms did what they did. It's exactly why ABC did what it did and why CBS did what it did. It's
not all the law firms.
Yeah.
I mean, here's what I think. Here's what I'll quibble with you, because I want you to think more. I'm not saying I'm right, but I think that the editorial team and the reporters will quit before they walk away from those stories.
As did many of the lawyers in those big law firms. They walked away and said, you know what? We're not going to. And so what? What's the matter? This one journalist is any better than Michael Cohen is a journalist?
I'm going to put a wager on this.
Okay.
If I believe the Wall Street Journal will drop another bombshell story before any kind of settlement. I believe that. What do I win if that's the case?
Dinner when I come out to teach your class or to speak to your class. All right. Yay. Final question, Jen. Final question. Yeah. Or otherwise, I'll even let you.
What do you win if you're right? Same thing.
Whoever picks up the bill.
Okay.
All right.
Can there be a cap? No more than $200. I'm not doing anything more than that.
Whatever you say. You're the boss. Now, final question, because the hour goes by way too quick here.
Oh, shoot.
So between the sealed Epstein files, the DOJ's quiet talks with Ghislaine, Trump's blacklist of now this major newsroom, are we witnessing the final collapse of accountability for the elite? Or is there still a legal fuse burning somewhere? I don't know where, but somewhere that might blow this whole thing wide open?
Yeah, it ain't going to be accountability for the elite. There's way too many spider webs and too many people connected to Epstein. I'd be happy if a couple more stories come out, but in the history of time, never happens.
Well, there we have it. Jen Taub, thank you so much for joining me again on Mea Culpa. Appreciate you, and I will be seeing you very, very soon to collect my dinner.
Never. Thanks, Michael.
You are.